can see in shot, the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, has arrived and he will be welcoming His Excellency, Mr. Muhammadu Buhari, who's on a state visit to South Africa. Remember, this will be the first incoming state visit to be hosted by South Africa under the sixth administration. South Africa and Nigeria, as you've heard from the reporting by Mzwandile Mbeche, share this political, economic and social relations that was formally established back in 1994. Now, the social relations part will be under the spotlight. You know what happened previously here in South Africa with regards to tensions between locals and foreign nationals. I understand that we have Mzwandile Mbeche live for us there. Mzwai, what are you witnessing this morning? All right, while we wait for Mzwai, we'll keep on these visuals. There you see the Deputy President of South Africa, as well as a number of cabinet ministers behind them. Remember, this is an official state visit, so it comes with a lot of pomp, a lot of ceremony as well, but it's important. On the agenda, the items on the agenda will be important besides the optics of the state visit. Remember, the formal relations have been conducted through a binational commission established back in 1999 as a structured bilateral mechanism to provide for this political, economic, social, cultural, scientific, as well as technical cooperation that myself and Mzwai were talking about earlier on. He's back on the line for us. Mzwai, what are you witnessing there?
Well, you can see the President of South Africa there waiting for his counterpart, the Nigerian counterpart, President Muhammadu Buhari, who is here in South Africa on an official state visit. Of course, the president having a bit of a chat with the officials there as he waits for his colleague from Nigeria. Of course, it's a very important visit, this one. We know what happened in the past few weeks where Nigeria basically was furious when those attacks happened on foreign nationals. But of course, you then had a situation where the special envoys were sent to try and calm the situation. That's the chief of state protocol there, Ambassador Lucy, having a chat with the president. The Nigerian delegation is here in full force to underscore the importance of these relations in terms of trade, in terms of politics, diplomacy. Wow, you can see there those beautiful architectural masterpieces of the Union Building where the Guard of Honor is lining up to welcome the President of Nigeria, who is here on a state visit. He will obviously be welcomed with a 21-gun salute, which is the highest honor that is given to a foreign visiting head of state. Well, that Union Building you are seeing there was designed by Sir Herbert Burger back in 1908. And of course, the actual construction started in 1910 and then it was concluded in 1913. It's played host to a number of events, a number of state visits like we are seeing today. From the time this country was divided along racial lines, and when this country entered into a new democratic dispensation. So it is the seat of power. This is where the executive authority of government sits, and the head of state, the president, this is where he sits. We have seen in the past the importance of building relations, particularly as South Africa goes through a number of economic challenges. While even Nigeria at the moment is not in the best of shapes, and these two countries are the biggest on the continent, and the rest of the continent really looks up to these two countries to pull the continent forward. So it's crucial that they are able to mend their relations, as we saw in the past few weeks. The special envoys sent by President Ramaphosa to Nigeria, to Ghana and other countries to try and really explain some of the events that had happened. And before that, Nigeria had also sent a special envoy to President Ramaphosa to find out what is it that was happening. So in a matter of minutes, we will be seeing the arrival of President Buhari, and President Ramaphosa, of course, will welcome him. And the importance, perhaps, of this visit again is that it's the first incoming state visit since President Ramaphosa was inaugurated as the president of this sixth administration in May. President Buhari of Nigeria is also doing his second term. You remember that he won re-election, and he was sworn in May again this year to serve his second last term. So the Nigerian system has a 4-year term, somewhat different from us. We have 5-year terms. In fact, here at the Union Buildings, I'm not the only one. I'm actually with my colleague, the foreign editor, Sophie Mkwena, who has been doing a lot of work as well and on this work. Sophie, what do you make of this interesting visit by Nigeria?
I think it's quite important, not only for the two countries, but for the continent in general. You know that these are the two big economies on the continent, and it is important that at all times these two countries are working together. There is synergy, because by working together they can be able to ensure that generally the continent is united. You know that Africa has just launched the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, where it is expected that all member countries of the AU are working together to build a better continent, particularly economically. But also what is critical is to ensure that there is synergy between the two countries on issues of politics. And you know, politics involves issues of security. Therefore, if South Africa and Nigeria are working together, the other member countries can take leave from the relationship of these two countries. On the issue of the Free Trade Area Agreement, you know that we were able to really sign and deposit the instruments as early as possible, but Nigeria had to consult its business people because there were concerns, and also they were about to go to the polls, and President Buhari didn't want a situation where he is going to lose elections because a particular constituency is not happy. Now we are all in sync, and therefore they must take a lead in ensuring that we implement the African Free Trade Area. As you see the president there greeting the delegation from Nigeria, you can see that he is communicating a message that we are together and we will work together, and we are prepared to unite not only the politicians but ordinary people from these two countries, or the citizens of these two countries. Because when you look at the issue of diplomacy is not only politics but also people to people, and therefore it is quite important that the body language, the statements that they communicate in general to the continent and the world, it's a message that says we are working together harmoniously, we are in sync, and we are ready to build a better relations, and that relations will translate into a better continent. You can see there the arrival of the president of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, who actually arrived in the country last night. He touched down around 9:15 in the evening. Now he is here. We'll see him as they open the door there. He is about to meet President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Sophie, it's quite important that South Africa next year takes over the chairpersonship of the AU, and South Africa meeting its biggest colleague on the continent. Quite important.
Yes. That handshake speaks to the two countries having to work together, even at the continental body. Before we even talk about the continental body, South Africa indeed will resume the chairmanship of the continental body, the AU, in January. But currently these two countries, these two big economies on the continent, are holding very critical position at the global stage. The president of the General Assembly of the United Nations is a Nigerian, as we speak. And you have the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Amina Mohammed, a Nigerian. South Africa currently is leading the Security Council. We've taken over the presidency of the Security Council. Therefore, it's quite important. An important gesture where the president right now is showing President Buhari that important symbol you see there that speaks to the participation and the involvement of women in the struggle of South Africa, the march, the Women's March.
Of course, and see Sophie there. They are looking at the importance, the role of our women, of the women in this country. How significant is this?
This is very important. You know very well that as the current president, as the current leader of the Security Council, South Africa has taken a decision to ensure that one of the issues they are going to champion in this 31 or 30 days is the role of women in peacekeeping, but not only in peacekeeping, but also in peace negotiations. And for President Ramaphosa to show President Buhari this symbol, to remind him that as we do whatever we are doing as leaders, we mustn't forget that women played an important role in the liberation of our country, but on the continent in general.
Absolutely, as we see them taking the steps down to come and join their colleagues, of course, that is the start of the official state visit. We'll then hear the 21 gun salute, but before that there would also be the national anthems.
Another important issue, Mzwai, it's, you know that this afternoon the two leaders will attend the Business Council of South Africa-Nigeria Business Council. And I think at that meeting, the two leaders will give an indication in terms of what they have agreed on to create an environment that is conducive for investment in line with the African Free Trade Agreement, where you are encouraging African countries to do business amongst themselves, but also to ensure that you deal with a trade deficit, because as these two countries are the main economies on the continent, there's a tendency that people view them as the big brothers of the continent, and therefore you have to deal with that perception. At the trade level, you have to ensure that you level the playing field.
Absolutely. We know that, in fact, when you talk about trade, South Africa almost exclusively imports oil, and if you look at those trade relations, they seem heavily skewed in favor of Nigeria. But the fact that it's only oil, and at least Nigeria gets things that are diverse from us, means a lot more still needs to be done in terms of diversifying and expanding trade between these two.
Yes, when you speak about the issue of oil, at the time where currently we have a crisis in the Middle East, Iran and Saudi Arabia at loggerheads, and to get oil in that country is very difficult. It is therefore important that the continent is at peace and we can use whatever we have on the continent to be self-sustainable, and Nigeria plays an important part in terms of...
Maybe let's pause there, Sophie. They are just about to begin. It was a 21-gun salute. As we see the guard of honor that President Buhari is about to undertake now. Well, the President of Nigeria will now be inspecting a guard of honor.
Muhammadu Buhari, a former army general himself?
Oh, of course, yes. And in this position, he's got it for the second time. You remember in the 80s,
Yes.
he once assumed power.
Yes, right now he is the commander-in-chief, but he's a former army general of Nigeria.
Well, one of the things that President Buhari really emphasized when he came to power was to fight the issue of corruption and deal with the issue of Boko Haram that has really troubled the country. In these past 5 years, do you think he's been able to do that?
Well, let's start with trying to deal with the issue of Boko Haram. He did try, but it is a very complex matter. At times, the army is able to repel the Boko Haram, but at times they do attack. We saw what happened last week where they kept young women, and those women now have children, and there are reports that those women were being abused. Therefore, it is a very, very complicated matter, which has also led to the instability in the neighboring countries such as Chad and Niger. On issue of corruption, you'd recall that of South Africa and the national anthem of Nigeria. I think on issue of corruption, President Muhammadu Buhari was appointed by the AU to chair the committee that dealt with issues of corruption because of the work that he was doing in his own country. now the national anthem of Nigeria.
Rather, the introduction. I think you meant the introduction of the delegation of the South African delegation by President Ramaphosa, starting with the Deputy President, the current minister, the previous minister, and a number of other ministers. I think Minister Dr. Naledi Pandor, Minister
the International Relations Minister. And now he is Minister of Home Affairs, former Minister of Health, Mutsualedi.
Well, that says a lot, Sophie. You see, the Nigerian delegation is quite large.
It's a high-powered delegation.
So does this point to an importance of repairing the relations which we saw in the past weeks being affected really by what has been happening in the country, and we saw those special envoys?
It speaks to how President Buhari is viewing this binational. He is really saying we have to talk, and all of us, we must be here as the cabinet of Nigeria to speak to leaders in South Africa to engage on important issues such as politics, trade, and the current balance of forces internationally. We are aware that it looks like the World Trade talks are collapsing because the two superpowers are in a very chaotic situation right now, the US and the UK, and the trade war between America and China doesn't help the situation either. Therefore, it is important for Africa to take its rightful place and position itself, and these two countries can lead on that front.
Oh yes, as we see President Buhari greeting the deputy ministers. We saw the former Minister of Intelligence, Mahlobo, who is now the deputy minister. There is quite a number of the South African delegation as well. I think that's Deputy Minister yes, it's an indication, though, that South Africa is also taking this very, very seriously.
Particularly after what transpired some few weeks ago when there were violence in the streets of Johannesburg and Pretoria. And much as South Africans have issues, I think the picture that was projected outside South Africa when you are not in South Africa, many people were convinced that things are falling apart and the whole country, people are fighting the foreign nationals, whereas it was a particular area or a particular province. And when they are here, they can understand the issue better. And you'd recall that when it started, because they were speaking from different positions, they couldn't really find one another. But after the engagement with the envoy, former Minister Jeff Hadebe, the President Buhari got a better sense of what was happening. It is for that reason yesterday the tone did change when the Foreign Affairs Minister of Nigeria was talking about this issue, even the controversial issue of compensation, now taking a more reconciliatory tone.
Well, we see the president now
the Foreign Affairs Minister of Nigeria
being introduced to the Nigerian delegation. Of course, we've just spoken to the minister there of Nigeria, Minister Jeffrey Onyama, and they're having a bit of a chat there. So it does appear that the relations really are being cordial, and which I think bodes well for the continent.
This is a good picture. This is a very, very good picture. The body language, you can see they are not tense. It's very, very cordial. You can see they are all smiles. It speaks to, I think, the work that was done by both the ministers yesterday, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Nigeria and the Minister of International Relations of South Africa, to kind of deal with these issues behind scenes, to ensure that when they are now in front of the continent, these pictures that we see speaks to, yes, there are challenges on the continent. At times we will be at loggerheads, but those problems are not insurmountable.
But behind those smiles, We know that South Africa and Nigeria, of course, there's no war between them, but the issue of influence, who is the rightful voice of this continent, that issue, you can see that it's somehow there. How do they deal with that?
No, I think you'd recall that during the tenure of former President Thabo Mbeki and President Obasanjo, they were able, much as there was this healthy competition and every country ensuring that they benefit in this relationship, there was a cordial relationship and the picture was very, very neat. And I think now it is the responsibility of President Cyril Ramaphosa to ensure that he does the same. This picture must be cordial.
Yes, as we see, they are going there into a tete-a-tete. So they are basically going to have a one-on-one talk about the issues without anyone seeing. So they will be able to be very frank and open with each other. Other than
no bar.
Absolutely. So that
they can even get into the skin of what has led to this tension. But,
yes.
I think they will find one another. Let's just allow the band to give us that music.